My grandmother, which is my only surviving grandparent, is there. And my aunties and uncles and cousins and friends and second cousins and cousins once removed. And,
Arash Azizi was born and raised in Tehran. He now lives in New York.
People very close to me are unfortunately experiencing this war. And of course, my hometown, Tehran, and my country, Iran, they are like a sibling themselves. So to see them hurt and burning, it's very difficult. And that's the difficulty many Iranians have to live with now.
And as Arash's family and friends suffer during the ongoing US and Israeli bombing, this week Iran announced a new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the assassinated Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. But who's really running the country now? And how is its elite Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, pulling the strings? I'm Nicole Johnston, and you're listening to 7am. Today, Iranian journalist and author Arash Azizi on what direction could Iran's elite armed forces take the country. It's Thursday, March 12. Arash, is the appointment of Mojtaba Khamenei a real signal that the Islamic Republic's not changing its course at all? And if anything, they could be hardening their position now towards the US, Israel, and the West.
This is certainly the signal that they like to give, that many of the supporters of Mojtaba Khamenei like to give. And this is how the hardline elements of the regime received the news and promoted it. But the reality, Nicole, is that Mojtaba is very unknown. We really don't know much about this guy. And the other reality is that he is going to have to share power with others. He's not going to be a strong supreme leader at the beginning. Does the selection of Mojtaba means that you will have a even more hardline regime for a foreseeable future? I think that's a possibility for sure, but it's in no way a foregone conclusion. And there are many reasons that militate against that. It's entirely also possible that, first of all, he might be killed, he might be sidelined, he might not be long in this world, and it's entirely possible that Iran will be taken into a different direction. I am humble in my prognosis and predictions. Iran has a way of humbling you. After all, I can't lie, he was not my first pick. If you asked me a few years ago, I wouldn't believe that he will be the supreme leader, yet here we are.
One of the things, though, that he seems to really have going in his favour is the strong relationship with the IRGC, the elite forces. How much of how this war progresses is really down to them? Who's really in charge now?
The Revolutionary Guards is a powerful force that controls much of Iran's politics, economy, and military. What it is not, however, is a unified force. It is very much a constellation of a few different networks, each of which has its hands in different places. So there are elements in the IRGC who love to deal with Russia and China. There are elements who might prefer some sort of a normalization with the West. There are elements who have different opinions on how much internally repressive the regime should be or socially. So while it is true that different parts of the Revolutionary Guards hold much power now, people like Bagher Ghalibaf, Speaker of the Parliament, I've spoken to him personally. You meet certain type of people who are, you can be clear, they have always just wanted to be their country top one leader, and he's one of them. He now effectively runs the war effort. Mojtaba was in many ways his candidate for supreme leadership. That's certainly what his supporters told me in the last few years. So they have the power now, but how they will use it is still an open question.
Are you getting any sense, though, about what the IRGC wants to do next, how they want this war to go?
This is a very good question because it also brings me to talk about the fact that, there are different ideological directions, but there are also different sort of tactical directions, right? So sometimes what to do next is not about how much you hate the West or love the West, but about what you seem as the more tactically right answer. For example, there are many across the Iranian political spectrum who believe Iran should have nuclear weapons. And this is a tactical, strategic consideration for them, to just believe this is a way to defend Iran. Now, where are they going to take the war? I mean, that is the million-dollar question. And of course, it's not entirely in their hand either, because it's in the hand of US and Israel. Perhaps the question for US and Israel is actually a clearer question, which is to say, when is it enough for them? For example, US can say, well, we've degraded the regime's military capabilities so that they won't be a threat outside their borders for the next 5 to 10 years.
As President Trump declared yesterday, we're crushing the enemy in an overwhelming display of technical skill and military force. We will not relent until the enemy is totally and decisively defeated. But we do so on our timeline and at our choosing.
Or they might say, no, you cannot have someone like Mojtaba in charge. We need to make sure the leadership changes again. We need to hit them hard, hit them again until this leadership changes. For the Islamic Republic, including the Revolutionary Guards who are currently running the war effort, question is similar in some ways, which is to say, what kind of an end do they want to get? And what kind of a deal do they want? Do they want a status quo antebellum, basically? Do they want to go back to where things were on February 28?
We don't see any reason why we should negotiate with the US. When we negotiated with them twice, and every time they attacked us at the middle of negotiations. So there is no request for a ceasefire by us.
Do they want something more ambitious? Do they want a process in which they can hope for sanctions to be lifted? Or do they want to really become the North Korea, dug in their heels, fight to the last battle without giving up things? But if I was to guess, I would say that in order to preserve their own privileges, they're more likely to find some sort of a middle ground at some point. You know, everybody's missiles finishes at some point.
Coming up, the struggle for power that's ahead. Arash, you're in the rare position of having political sources inside Iran. So are you getting any sense that Iran's starting to run out of options and resources and that it could eventually cut a deal?
If I was to guess, and I told you it's a humbling thing trying to guess things in Iran, they'll find some sort of a deal that would put US back for a while, put Israel back for a while, find a way for them to live with their region, and perhaps then they would make the other changes. But this is not just about US and Israel. As importantly are Iran's Arab neighbors, who have now been, many of them have been attacked by the regime. They're very worried about the regime.
We are not part of this war. We don't want to be a part of that war. We don't want to be dragged into it. But defending our country will remain a principle that will never change.
And in fact, if you're an Arab nation, it is an Arab majority region. There are 22 Arab countries in this region. Arabs have seen in the last little while that non-Arab powers have dominated the region. Israel, Iran, and Turkey have dominated the region. They've dominated them by their military actions and by forces in the Arab politics that are loyal to them, like Hezbollah in Lebanon and others. And this is a very unsatisfactory situation to be in. So, what they want is to make sure the region is safe, the trade goes on, living standards that people in the GCC countries are used to will be preserved. And for that, they are going to have to contain Iran and deal with Iran. And Iran would have to find a way to live with them. So this is all the considerations that the IRGC and Iranian leadership have to take as they figure out their plans for the continuation of the war.
Arash, one of the things that really struck me over the last few days was that moment when Iran's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, came out and apologized to the Gulf states for attacking them.
I must apologize on my own behalf and behalf of Iran to the neighboring countries that were attacked by Iran. The Interim Leadership Council agreed yesterday that no more attacks will be made on neighboring countries.
Why did he do that? Because it seemed a pretty big U-turn.
Well, this is a very fascinating point that really shows that important elements in the regime are really worried about the future of their relations with GCC countries. You have to remember that Saudi Arabia, in a not too distant future, had cut diplomatic relations with Iran. Other Arab countries had followed. It took tremendous diplomatic effort by Iran to reestablish these ties. With the mediation of China, Tehran and Riyadh reestablished their ties in 2023. Iran had slowly rebuilt its link with the Emiratis, with other countries.
Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain will establish embassies, exchange ambassadors, and begin the cooperative and work together so strongly to cooperate as partners across.
And even in the aftermath of the Abraham Accords, the Trump-mediated deal that brought diplomatic relations between Israel and some Arab countries, Iran had been able to rebuild its ties with Arab countries a little. And now it saw all of those threatened. And a message by Pezeshkian was almost a panicked way of trying to say, well, don't worry, not everything is done. But of course, he kind of got a huge pushback from inside the regime. Even figures close to him effectively walked back on his comments. So it didn't work out so well. But it does tell me, Nicole, that inside the regime, there is serious worries about the future of Iran's relationship with its neighborhood.
Do you see any sign that the next chapter in Iran will be any less brutal or repressive than the one that we've had for almost the last 40 years?
You have to maintain some sort of optimism and hope. Antonio Gramsci, the Italian thinker, used to say, you have to have optimism in will, pessimism in analysis. So, you shouldn't sugarcoat realities, but, you should have this will that, from bad situations, better things can come. I do have hope that worst of Khamenei's zealot policies of anti-Americanism, of wanting to destroy Israel, of wanting to impose this puritanical Islamist vision on the Iranian people, that this will be slowly discarded by whoever wins the power struggles coming in the Islamic Republic. And while I'm not optimistic that we'll get a democratic transition or anything of the sort anytime soon, I think it is possible that we will get, less repressive condition and hopefully a more open Iran. But I mean, even that sounds pretty dreamy right now where we are. We're at the abyss of a terrible war. Many innocent people are dying. And the political conditions don't look good. It looks like people with guns, the worst sorts of factions of the Islamic Republic are in charge of things. But one has to maintain sort of, as I said, optimism of will. And I'll tell you this, Nicole, Iran's battle for democracy goes back at least, our first victory arrived in 1906 in the Constitutional Revolution, and we got our first parliament. And that's more than 120 years ago. And women's rights, environmental justice, all the other causes that matter. And we should keep fighting for those and for a better Iran. And this is not something that should stop, regardless of Khamenei Senior or Junior is in charge or someone else. These fights should not stop. They should go on, and they will go on.
Arash, thanks so much for talking to us today.
Of course. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Also in the news, newly elected Nationals leader Matt Canavan says we need more Australian everything, including babies, farming and fossil fuel-powered barbecues. The right-wing Queensland senator beat out Bridget McKenzie and Kevin Hogan in a three-way race for the top job. Darren Chester will be his deputy as the new leadership tries to fend off a surging One Nation. And one of the 7 Iranian soccer players given asylum in Australia has decided to return to Iran after all, according to Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke. The Iranian government now says the women will be welcomed home and need not fear punishment, accusing Australia of frightening the players and pressuring them to seek asylum. I'm Nicole Johnston. This is 7am. Thanks for listening.